right, here we go. Overdrive, off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan. I wouldn't call that positive music out of the gate. I wouldn't call it negative music. It was just room temperature music to get the ball rolling.
Why wasn't the music Staying Alive?
Is that what you're looking for, Staying Alive?
I don't know. Daniel Winnick thinks, hey, be positive. Hazy, you tweeted out something the other day saying, hey, man,
wow,
they came back. The comments underneath, me and Noodles had a talk. I don't think that one landed. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me explain that, okay?
Yes.
So I actually inspired, right, by the life coach and then by you, because you're an inspirational individual now. We're cleaning out the house a little bit, right? And there's a bunch of things we're moving around in the basement.
Doesn't it feel good, by the way?
Yeah, it feels great. Now we got so much stuff we got to get rid of, and it's my wife's putting stuff online, and people are showing up at the house all the time. It's really getting awkward. I ran into a guy yesterday, and he was like, "Hey, man, I'm here to." I'm like, "Just please, I'll turn around, pretend we didn't do this. Just grab what you're here to get, and we'll leave."
You of all people,
it's so
hate
awkward.
That.
It's so awkward. I feel like the guy knew who I was too, and it was a really awkward scene. So anyway, we're going through stuff, and I had a bag that I hadn't seen in years that we're getting rid of, and we went through it. Like, I wonder what's in there, and I open it up, and there happened to be a tag from Game 6 of the 2018 Leafs-Bruins series, probably the last time I used that bag. So out of curiosity, I thought, okay, I wonder what happened there. I remember they won Game 6, because I remember in 2018 they were down 3-1 in the series, but I didn't remember how it all played out. So I jumped online and I took a look. They lost 5-1 at home, or 5-1 in Game 1 in Boston, and they lost 3-1 at home Game 4 to be down 3-1 in the series. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. It's literally the exact same thing. 5-1 to start the series, 3-1 Game 4. You're heading back to Boston for Game 5. You're down 3-1 in the series. Figured, you know what? I'm going to tweet that out. I find that quite interesting, quite compelling.
Symmetry.
Like the symmetry is actually shocking. How similar the two series actually are in 2024 and 2018. And then about 2 minutes after that, I said, I better follow this up because I know what's coming. I know people are going to say, here we go. Now you think No, I'm just literally pointing out facts of what happened in 2018.
You just wanted to say it's been done before.
Well, they pushed it to 7. Now, as many people responded with, and accurately so, they didn't win the series. They didn't come back in 2018 and actually win it. So I'm not sure what history tells us about what is forthcoming. But they were down 3-1 in 2013, pushed that to 7. They were down 3-1 in 2018. I don't know. If you're an optimistic Leaf fan, maybe there's something there for you.
I thought you woke up Sunday and just had a moment of because I'll be honest, and I want both of your reactions. Oh, you and I worked together, so we saw each other's reactions. We saw, we felt the angst from Leaf Nation. I got a text Saturday night on my way home after the piano saying, Hayes is on tilt on SportsCenter. And I was like, I don't know what that means. And it was just basically you were on fire, just spitting fire. And I was like, okay, I got to rush home and see this, but I missed it because we were doing our hit, right?
So why don't we do a circle back on the comments? What was said?
But then I guess let me finish because I want to. Sunday I saw the tweet and I'm like, okay, you woke up and go, okay, it's a new day. Let's see how this unfolds. And then I read the comment under, can't wait to read the mentions. So I was, of course, started to read the mentions, and that's what I said to O today. I go, those mentions, people are like, just done, and then other people, Mary Swanson, there's a chance, right?
Yeah, there's very few people in there. Listen, it had what I went through yesterday, or what I tweeted out yesterday, had nothing to do with my opinion changing on Saturday night. I stand by everything I said after that game. I thought I was incredibly composed. I was saying it was a scathing review of the game because they were awful. They were horrendous on Saturday. And I was in the building, and I thought the atmosphere leading up to it, they did just an incredible job of saluting Bob Cole. The energy was amazing. The anthems were awesome. The crowd was going nuts. And I thought it was one of the worst efforts I can recall in a long, long time. I don't feel any differently today. I didn't feel differently yesterday. I literally was going through the bag, and then I stumbled across it, and I looked it up. I'm like, actually, it's very similar to 18. What I will say is a lot of the comments, revisionist history, right? Now people are like, yeah, but this team's different. No one believed they were doing anything in 18 either. And they didn't. They still lost in 7, but they did go and win Game 5. They did win Game 6. That's possible. They could win a game. Obviously, Joseph Woll's going to play. I think if you're riding any shred of hope at this point, it's a Joseph Woll miracle. That's what you're banking on here. A Joseph Woll from the Boston area, went to school down there, rides a miracle wave. That's what you've got. If you're a Leaf fan, you're riding the backup, and it's a miracle Joseph Woll wave, because what we've seen through 4 games, there's nothing to believe that this team is just going to turn it on, because Saturday night was a massive game. You guys talked about it on the panel. I talked about it ringside afterwards, and it was a really deflating effort.
Yeah,
really,
and
really bad
there
game.
was Noodles touched on it. There was the Marner goal, and then some opportunities and some urgency, almost like score effects urgency. And we both said to each other before we went on air, we're like, that was great and everything, but when you are fighting for your life, because everyone's not stupid here. Everyone, the fans, the players, coaches, everyone knows you lose that game, you're in big time trouble. The likelihood of coming back against that team, the way things are going right now, probably not good. Mm-hmm. So there had to be the urgency at the drop of the puck. And we can talk about the Boston Bruins and what Marchand is doing and what Pasternak is doing. And what a comment from Jim Montgomery that said after the game, big-time players got to make big-time plays, and that's what those guys are doing, which is fantastic for the Boston Bruins. But the way they play in the neutral zone, they don't give up much. And Jeremy Swain, like, where's the adjustment? Do you just cave in and say, oh, we can't muster up? I told you guys on this show before the series, if they don't try to muster up some kind of ground and pound game and try to generate offense that way, they're not going to give you much else. What were the rush chances the other night, Jamie?
Nothing.
0?
Nothing. They had
Zero.
Zero.
They had
Saturday
zero rush chances. I showed the Sportlogic stats to O, because you get them right after the game, and they had 0 rush chances. And they didn't have a lot of high danger.
I'm not
chances
stat
either.
guy, but that one resonated. That one landed with me.
Like I say, sometimes, again, what I like to do is take a look at the stats and then put my eye test to it and go, do they match? Well, it did match, because, yes, Swayman made some good saves, but he didn't have to be all world. There just wasn't a lot. It was a real clogged up game. It was like it was played in a sandbox. Like, it was kind of methodical. Mm-hmm. Hayes, you were in the building. And getting back to what I opened with, Hayes, I went back and watched. I thought you were bang on. Like, you weren't on, like, tilt is the right word, because it's like this guy's shooting nails, like firing. I thought you were perfect in your analysis. It was just you were like, well, I could see the steam coming out of your head, and I was like, okay, this guy's in the building. The voice of Leaf Nation. Basically, you were spewing it out perfectly, and O and I were on the panel talking the same thing. But I thought it was a methodical game, and nobody pushed through. And now I'm concerned that 34 is either banged up, sick, combination,
something's
both.
Something's really weird going on there.
Something's fishy there, guys.
Something's really fishy, because
it's not sick.
No, I mean,
you're not sick for that many days in a row. Something's up with him.
Something's going on with this guy. I mean, what I find fascinating about this is that Sheldon Keefe, the first comment he made to the media before they played a game, no medical updates, strict orders, don't ask me anything. And now he's given deep-rooted updates on Auston Matthews and how he's feeling. I find it hard to believe. If he is ill, it's something really, really serious. Like, it's not the standard flu or cold, because it kicked in a week ago. I don't recall a scenario. I can't remember one where a guy played 40 minutes and left in the third. And I find it impossible to believe, and you guys can speak to this better than I can, the idea of a doctor going up to him and saying, can I check your temperature to see if you can play in the third?
No. I saw him on the bench with the trainer, and he said to the trainer, I can't bleep and skate.
Yeah, he was so out of it on Saturday in terms of the way he was skating, the way he was playing. You wouldn't even notice he played. Like, you really would not have noticed through 40 minutes that he even was playing. And I think the same thing in Game 3. Like, something has popped up. He may have had an illness. I don't dispute that. It may be a combination of whatever. Ultimately, it doesn't necessarily matter. The Leafs aren't the only team that every team does this. No one's going to give full details. No one's going to be
Right.
fully transparent. They're going with illness because it was out there already. He may not be feeling well, but it doesn't sound like he's playing tomorrow night. Like the audio coming out of Skate today would indicate they're basically moving past him. And the idea of a flu or a cold or whatever keeping him out of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Wrong.
Game 5. Yeah. I mean, it
Which is
doesn't
just their
add up.
it's just their thing. They don't want to disclose what's up. Nobody. It doesn't really matter anyway. If you're saying that he's probably not playing, then they have to pull off the miracle here. They have to have Joseph Woll go in there and have the game of his life, and everyone else play way above what they've been, because I don't know. You lose that game in the fashion they did, it basically looks like curtains.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's really where they're at. And I will say, I had that thought watching on Saturday. It was a weird vibe when Matthews was on the ice. And again, the Leafs originally just tweeted out he's not returning, didn't give a reason, and then they waited.
Yeah.
Keefe came out, then he gave a reason, which means they convened. They figured out, okay, how are we going about this? And they revealed the info. But we had a lot of discussions on who should win the Hart Trophy this year. What I saw to this team in Game 3 and Game 4 boosted his case, because if he's not ripping 10, 12, 14 shots on net, scoring every single game.
Not a lot going on.
There's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. And what he represented throughout the season was the opponent basically had to throw all their time and energy at that guy. And then it opened up lanes for everyone else. And when he's not himself, because he was in Game 2, and we saw what happened in Game 2. He wasn't in Game 3. He certainly wasn't in Game 4. There wasn't anyone else that really stepped up. And, Again, we don't know if he's going to play. They're saying they hope he's going to play. Do we have the audio from John Tavares from today on Matthews? Why don't we play this? Because I think this is an indication of where the Leafs are at and maybe where they're at with Matthews. Here's what Tavares had to say about the possibility of missing him.
It's not ideal not to be without Auston Matthews. I mean, I was talking about one of the best players in the world. But there's tremendous depth, I think, talent and character on this team, and it's a great opportunity for all of us to step up, raise our game, which is already needed and necessary. So, just go out there and stick, like I said, stick together, believe in one another and what we're doing, and just keep pushing forward, keep fighting.
Man, those comments, he just needs to come out one time and say, they don't have to be Wendell Clark or Doug Gilmour, but we've got the tremendous depth, and we believe. Just say it. We got to show some balls and some nuts and go into Boston and win a game. If not, we're done and we're screwed. And it's our fault because we haven't performed up to the standard lately. All that other stuff is nonsense, man. And I know that he's he's a different guy than I am. He's a different guy than all three of us are. He's a smart guy. He looks at things differently. But it's just got to cut it out.
I think it's gone too far, though. I think he's afraid to put a target on his back. Quite frankly, I think they all are.
He doesn't have to put it on his back. He's the captain. He speaks on behalf of the team.
But that's what I'm saying, though. If you're the captain, step up and say, if Matthews isn't here, I'm going to be the best player on the ice. He's not doing that because he knows he can't be. That's the issue. John Tavares is actually kind of blended in here. The whipping boy is Mitch Marner right now. Everyone's got to take on Mitch. Willie and where he's at, what happened, and how did he miss the first 3 games. Now the distraction's Auston Matthews. John Tavares is the captain of this team. He's making $11 million.
Okay, Brian, but he doesn't have to go in there. He doesn't have to say, I'm going to be the best guy.
I'd like to see it, though. Why not? I mean, that's what I'm saying. I agree with you. Say something differently, but he won't, because then it's all right, you do it. And I don't think he can. And I think he knows
And you know what? Ultimately, it probably doesn't matter anyway. Sometimes it'd just be hero talk anyway. But just to it's just so matter of fact. The way they played and the way they're losing time and time again, year after year. And it's execution, and we believe in the guys, and we got enough in there. It's just
the same thing with the coach.
What are you talking about, man?
That's where I was going to go, guys. It's 3-1. Yes, it doesn't look good. But I'm telling you, we sat there. Hayes, I'm sure you were on a headset. Listen to the media Saturday night. They were talking like the season was over. They asked in the scrum. They asked Sheldon it was almost like a post-mortem.
I was in the room watching them.
It was Listen, I get it. You're
Media
down.
guy,
It's
journalist.
of course.
Did you ask a question?
I try. I would have. It was. You know how they operate. Anyway, we're not going to get into that.
Okay,
but.
so we'll get into that. But you're right. It's somber. People are pissed off. There was emotions. I get that. We'll get into the emotions on the bench in a bit. But the post game was like everyone was coached up to just say, yeah, we're trying, we care. There was all these bullet points he wanted to hit.
Yeah.
But Sheldon talking was.
Noodles,
It was
do you
like
want to
the
know
life
why
had
it was
been
like
sucked
that?
out of his
Do you-
body.
Do you want to know why?
Why?
Because it felt like that.
Well, I understand that, but you still got to play. Like you just said.
No, I know that.
Tomorrow's a game, and you got it's do or die. Your back's up against the wall. All of the cliches, treat it like a game 7, all of this stuff. But you don't do that post-mortem when you're still in the middle of the series, even though you're down. Like, to me, I stayed up late, but I didn't listen to LA's media last night or some of the other teams, Winnipeg's and all that the teams that are down 3-1. But one sounded defeated, which,
it was, by the way, it was do or die before Saturday's game. Like, you can say tomorrow's do or die. Saturday was do or die. Like, that just had to be deflating. Like, there had to be some, like, just I said it the best I could. They had to have the game of their life to give themselves a chance to win the game. That doesn't guarantee you're going to win the game. You got to have everyone had to elevate and have the game of their life where you look and you're like, well, maybe they got something here. And you described the first 2 periods, how horrific it was. How do you expect to have a chance to win like that? I don't know. It's
something
else.
We're answering, our own questions as to why they sounded defeated. I think the general approach of the organization too is they're. I said last year after they lost, it was like there was no soul in there, and that's kind of what it sounded like again. Everything there's so much nervous energy that built up over the years and years of failure, and the way people react, and how the fans going to treat us, and how is the media going to treat us, and we better be careful here. So when in doubt, it's cliche, shell. And same thing with this injury stuff, right? And the Matthews stuff, something's going on there. It's and they're trying to protect them. And I'm sure there's nervous energy in the building that people, if the dust settles and they lose here, it's going to be, all right, well, what did he get injured down the stretch? Did Willie get injured down the stretch, chasing 100 points, chasing 70 goals? All that's going to hang over this team and organization. There's a new president and CEO in the building, Keith Pelly, right, which obviously probably adds to it. The players wouldn't. The players don't care, but everyone else would in the way that they operate. They've lost 6 consecutive playoff games at home. That's absurd. It's an outrageous statistic. 11 straight playoff games where they haven't scored more than 3 goals in 10 of those 11.
For a team that gets 100 points.
Well, that's it. And there's a lot there, and as a result, it's like they're so high-strung. And yet they've done it to themselves, where all they had to do was play well, win one of those 2 games. You go back and it's the best 2 out of 3. It's not only game 4. They could have won game 3. They scored first. It was 2-2 with 8 minutes to go. That's their game at home. You close that, and you can not live with what happened Saturday, but you can move past what happened Saturday. And it didn't happen. And as a result, it just, it felt very defeated. Like watching and listening to Keefe, It was just a guy that he clearly doesn't have the answers. Because if they did, they would have done it by now, right? Special teams are a mess. They can't score. They can't create offense. Today he came out and said,
which is crazy. That's their bread and butter. That's all we talk about all year is points and offense and cycles and this and that. Yeah, and that's the one thing that they can't get to.
Well, I mean, it's because in the regular season on a Tuesday, the ice isn't contested. The neutral zone's not clogged up. You want to circle back? There's room to do that. You circle back now, you get killed. Like that's really what it is. The adjustment to playoff hockey is to win a 3-2 game, a 2-1 game, and play a patient game. And that's where special teams come in.
Yep.
Is okay. Hey, 5-on-5. If it's just a wash because there's no space. When there is a little bit of space out there, that's when you create. That's when your talent takes over. And their penalty kill, that's urgency and goaltending and all of the things that you lump in. These are all cliches that I'm talking about, but there's your formula again. 5-on-5. I look at teams throughout the league. That's what they're doing right now. It's for the most part, teams are, we're going to try and keep it tight 5-on-5, and if we get a chance, we're going to make a difference on the power play or a big kill here or there.
Well, even Boston's an example. It's not like the Leafs are giving up 7 a night and getting pumped.
No.
Like they lost 4-2 with an empty net in Game 3, and they lost 3-1 the other night. Like they're not getting destroyed. Boston's not putting up getting turnover after turnover and odd man rush after odd man rush.
No.
It's just they are capitalizing when they do get in alone, and they're putting up a power play goal every single night, if not multiple power play goals. And that is the difference right now. And like Swayman is a difficult assessment because he's obviously been really good. I don't think he's been tested. Like they didn't even test him the other night.
Random flurries, we'll call it.
Yeah,
if that, like exactly a couple of random flurries. Edmondson was in close. Willie was in close at times. And then he just routinely went about his business and made stops. Full credit to him. He hasn't had to stand on his head. Like at no point in this series, even Ullmark in Game 2, didn't have to stand on his head. Matthews pulled off an unbelievable move on him to win the game. Other than that, Ullmark basically did what he was supposed to do. And the Leafs just have not left a game yet where I think you can say, man, that's as well as they can play. Maybe that's the glass half full, if there's belief. But I think the core of this conversation and what we took out of the way they played Saturday and the way they talked about it Saturday, and this has probably been an issue that's been there for years, and this gets back to the people in charge that are supposed to make these decisions. I don't think these guys in the room believe that they can do it. And that means they didn't believe before the puck dropped on Game 1. And ultimately, it doesn't matter who you have in the lineup, how you're built, what your cap system's like, your farm system, who's behind the bench, who's in net, what your special teams look like. If you don't believe you can win, you can't win in pro sports. You can't win.
It goes back to what I talked about. There was no and I don't expect these guys to be like junior hockey players and dye their hair. But you look at Connor McDavid in training camp, made everybody come in, and he's like, this is cup or bust, and that's our goal, and that's all we do. I don't care if I get 30 goals, 15 goals, 100 assists, whatever. That is our main objective. That was never talked about once. Before the playoffs, they didn't come up with any kind of slogan. Nobody said, this is I don't know. There was just no build-up towards it, listening to them. And it was just like, well, the playoffs are starting, and then I don't know. Yeah, we're gonna do what we do. It was just a weird buildup, and you talk about the belief. Maybe that's why there's not a ton of belief.
Well, you got to find something, and you and I talked about it, Hayes. I don't know how you feel about it. Like I had no problem with the exchange on the bench. That happens all the time. I was joking. 880 games on the bench in my life. Technically, 880 games. I heard a lot of exchanges, but. You made a great point. That probably should have happened 6 years ago.
Yeah,
or 7 years,
6 years ago to say we got to be serious here and grown ass men, and then maybe it would have gone on a different path where they all held each other accountable. 8 years later, it's like stop being a whatever you call them. I don't know, but I liked Willie for doing it. Willie looked for the first time to me like a grown ass man on the bench. Beard, telling somebody to shut their mouth. I didn't know if he had that in him. But I was happy that he had something to say.
Yeah, and now I think, again, there's a spotlight on him because he's got to be a lot better in Game 5. He was in a tough spot coming in cold. I thought he had moments where he got going, moments where he was slashing through the neutral zone and looked comfortable, but he didn't bring a lot. He kind of blended in like everyone else did. And, if Matthews is not – even if Matthews is playing tomorrow, and maybe he does, but Spidey senses are going off. I think we all share it. Something's going on here that this guy is leaving a game after 2 periods and not practicing, and they're not certain he'll be ready tomorrow night. That I think has a lot of people questioning whether or not he'll play. But even if he does, their back is still up against the wall.
Sure.
If he doesn't, it's got to be collectively just an elevated game from everyone across the board. And they're dealing with a lot of doubters. And it's reasonable because of their history. Well, they don't have a history of being a clutch team or a team with a killer instinct. So
they got to play desperate. That's really what it is. Desperation is. I know, and there's doubters and all of that type of stuff, but you got to go in and the focus is, hey, go and steal one on the road and bring it back to your building and see if you. But you got to play the desperation because. the one thing, and there was a question, and I thought it was a good question, and I thought Sheldon had a good answer the other night, where it said, like, are you, the lack of offense, like, have you thought about changing things to try and, open it up and score? And he said, yeah, we can, but that team over there's not going to allow that. Boston's not going to put up their hand and go, okay, let's try and have a 7-6 game. Mm-hmm. So, you have to react to what you're given. And, look at it. I don't know if you guys stayed up to watch the Edmonton game. Edmonton just was really patient. I think they had, 13 shots on goal last night or whatever it was.
They had nothing. They scored the power play goal. And
it was a 5-on-5 game where there was just a bunch of nothing burger. Like, you look at the stats, I think Skinner made 33 saves. He had 4 high-danger chances. Like, it was to me, that was kind of – the Leafs got to go and do that, where it's just – maybe it's a nothing game, but you have a difference maker here or there as far as, keep it tight, and then you have somebody push through, a punch through, or a special play or a special team play. But that's what you've got. It's got to be that desperation where
Noodles, you mentioned the word doubters. You mentioned the word doubters. There's not doubters here. There's just smart people.
Well,
because they have not seen anything to look at and say, if they do that, they have one game where Auston Matthews took over the game because he's one of the top 3 players in the world. And that's what their sample size. The Boston Bruins fans, they could look at their team and say, if they play to their game and they get an unbelievable performance, they'll give themselves a chance to the win. What do the Leafs have for anybody to cling to say if they do that, they'll win? It's Auston Matthews. There's no team play or special teams, so they have nothing. There's not doubters. They're just smart, and they're looking at what's on the ice and what they're doing, and there's no reason to have confidence. They're not doubters. They're just looking at it and being realistic. They're smart. They're calling what they're seeing on the ice. That's it. They're not doubting anything.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. I think it's, I was using the word because it's just, there's people that you say something and it's like, it's not going to happen. To me, you have to go and earn it. That's what I'm saying. It has to be a desperate game. And whether we believe it's going to happen, they believe it's going to happen, whether you call them doubters or not, the sample size through 4 games of what we've seen, they're down 3-1. That's the reality of it. That's not, and they deserve to be. So at the end of the day, you got to go win one game and see what happens. But there's a formula there. I don't know if they'll achieve it. Again, if 34 is not in the building, that's tough. But this is adversity, and your back's up against the wall. Let's see what you got here. I mean,
they've been learning lessons for a long time, right? They've said a million times over the last 8 years, learning lesson, learning lesson, learning lesson. Well, here's the exam, right? And for me, again, I would simplify it to Joseph Woll miracle. That's where I'm at. Like, I'm not expecting the Leafs to come out flying, and be phenomenal and dominate the game. That's not going to happen. They might match the Bruins. That could happen. Maybe they match them. But for me, it's Joseph Woll. And even the song and dance, we're not naming who's in. Just say it. He's in. Like, everything you've done so far has gone nowhere for you. The way that they're playing the games. And just say, we're going with the kid. Because you've already admitted to it. Keith said today, special teams and goaltending, not good enough. And all right, well, then Joseph Woll's going in. And I don't think Samsonov's been great. I don't think he's been awful. They can't score. If you can't score goals, it doesn't matter what your goalie's doing.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was kind of listen, he gave up that bad goal to Frederick.
That was
no
crushing.
Argument.
That was a crushing goal.
So maybe he's pointing to that. But the other night, that wasn't on Samsonov. That was a lethargic, maybe timid, scared start. I don't know what Hayes, you're in the building. Define what that start, the first 40 was. Lethargic, what was it?
Sure, all those words. You can use a million of them. They're all. Right. It's all just not good enough in the end. Flat, not good enough, no life, no energy, waiting for the Bruins to take it. That's probably how I would describe it. Waiting for Boston to say, okay, if you're not going to take it, we will, and we'll go back for Game 5. Mike Johnson will join us today. Pierre LeBrun, the Jays are back in action. They dropped 2 of 3 over the weekend. They're loving this with the Leafs. Just let the Leafs keep playing so no one's focused on what's going on with the Jays. We will focus on that in a couple of hours. And the Leafs are not the only team in the position they're in. Let's call it what it is. The first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, been a disaster. Been awful. Mm-hmm. It's every series is a sweep or 3-1. The only thing you got hope for is that Dallas wins Game 4, and that can turn
Yeah.
into a great, great series because
Yes.
everything else
And
A strong show.
a little bit of love for Vancouver. They were
Yes.
losing that game.
What
They're
a
losing,
game. What a
Losing
game,
3-1.
Noodles.
And Colton Sissons, though, he's got a wide open. He daggers them. That's 2-2.
You know
and
what,
got a
though?
whole new
Quinn
series.
Hughes on the blue line, he
I
misses
know.
this one. Quinn Hughes, that play he made, and that's once again we're going back to star players making big plays. He
Yeah.
had that keep in at the blue line in that move.
On Nyquist, yeah.
That
ridiculous.
was what great players do, because that play kept it alive and they ultimately scored after.
Yeah, we'll come back and get more into that and what else is going on throughout the country. More as we look ahead to Game 5, Leafs-Bruins tomorrow night as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Jay's back in action tonight. We'll get to that. A couple of games in the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. And tomorrow, a lot of Canadian content, including the Leafs-Bruins Game 5. But the conversations we're having in Toronto, they're having in Winnipeg right now, too. And the conversations they're having in Edmonton, they're having in Vancouver, because the Canucks and Oilers are up 3-1, and the Leafs and Jets are down 3-1. And, we mentioned that Canucks comeback yesterday. That's the kind of stuff that, like, magical runs are made
Yes.
of, right?
Yes.
Those are the games you remember when you get to a cup final and you say, remember that, Game 4 against Nashville.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the Braden Holtby kind of stick save where it's like, oh my God, you did that, and then ultimately they go on and win a bunch of games. You're right. You gotta have one or two of those where it's just the miracle comeback. And Nashville, like, they leave that rink and they're going to Van saying, good night, like, good night. They'll fight and they'll play for the coach and Trotzy, but that's a tough one to swallow, man.
Well, it's a dagger because you pretty much okay, watching that game, I don't know if you saw, they had the stats. I believe at the time, Vancouver had like 12 shots on goal. Like, it was the lowest shots on goal in, like, their history in a playoff game, something like that. Like, there was nothing going because Nashville was smothering them. There was just no space. They couldn't get anything going. They had their third goaltender in there, which was crazy to start off with. Like, you just had so much going on. And Nashville makes it 3-1, and they couldn't get anything going. And within the last 3 minutes, and especially after Sissons misses that open net goal, and now Quinn Hughes is breaking ankles. That's like 14 seconds left in the period. And he's making moves like that. A lot of times a player would panic and just try and throw it to the net. He makes a play and passes back to the top of the umbrella. Like, they were making plays and had poise right till the very end. So, I mean, Vancouver's, it has been impressive. They're resilient. And, they're in the driver's seat. And now we'll see. I don't know if they're going to get DeSmith back. It sounds like he had a little tweak there, so they might get their number 2 goaltender back. That might lead into number 1 if they get through the series. Like, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's still up for grabs in terms of what's going to happen with Demko. But, yeah, it would suggest that DeSmith could return. We'll see. But, yeah, that was just a miracle, incredible comeback. And Hughes and Pettersson, at times have looked a little bit overwhelmed by playoff hockey. And, Pettersson in particular, he had that awkward situation where he got caught up in the goal celebration yesterday.
That was do we have it? It is. I don't know why. I was watching it live and I burst out laughing.
So did I.
It's like,
because he wanted no part of that interaction. Like,
No.
well, but the guy just dusts him to the side. His name is Jeremy Lauzon, and just throws him to the side, and he falls and goes into
Yard
the pile.
sale. Dude,
yeah,
yard
it was a yard
sale.
sale.
But you know what, guys?
Bunny
His
Hill
teammates have-
at Blue Mountain.
his teammates have bought him some time.
Yeah,
Exactly.
With some victories, and sooner or later, if they do want to go the distance, he has to continue to get better every day and
Yep.
become the player that he is. Because he can't sit on the sidelines for more than one round. And it looks like they will get through one with him being a ghost. So that's a credit to the team and the coach and everyone else the way they played. But if they've got to be thinking, dude, if we get you cooking and you can become one of the best players in the league, which you are, it just increases our chances and makes us more dangerous. You can buy guys time. Mm-hmm. I had a crappy round against Montreal, and if you show up and start playing against Toronto, Jersey, You can do something, but you can't disappear the whole time.
No, and he's special enough, he will. But you're right. I think I like the verbiage, like his team's bought him some time where, they didn't have to lean on him. Last night or yesterday afternoon, it was Besser that got the hat trick. JT Miller has been all over it. Quinn Hughes has, walked the line, getting some points, scoring from the back end. So, it will be his time. They haven't, luckily they haven't needed him. But they are going to need him if they're going to go on a deep run.
If you're going on a deep run, if you're playing Edmonton next, which they will, if all things, lead to that. I mean, Edmonton's now up 3-1, and Vancouver up 3-1. I mean, that is going to be an incredible series. Vancouver had their number throughout the season, clearly. But as we've witnessed, Colorado, Winnipeg, it doesn't really matter what happened during the regular season unless it's Bruins-Leafs. Then it actually was a precursor of what's going to happen because the Bruins dominated the Leafs all season, and we know where they're at in the playoffs. But, going into the Winnipeg-Colorado series, Winnipeg was on a high. Colorado was fading. Hellebuyck's going to unanimously win the Vezina. Yeah. And everything has just turned upside down. And they're defensively, they're a mess. Hellebuyck is in a horrible place. Like, even the Makar goal was beautiful.
Dude, no kidding.
That can't go in.
No, he can't.
Stop that.
Sometimes
that was an awful
people
shot.
And people are all over the Jets, and that series flipped. It was like Georgiev was just a disaster. And MJ described it, guys, like they murder teams at home.
Murder.
Like that murder, flat out murder. And it's just an example or some insight into how good some of the best players in the league are. When that McKinnon and Makar and those boys decide they want to murder you, there's not much you can do. You need a save from your goaltender, but you see how much better they are and the drive that they have and how much winning is important. And they flushed off that first game and said, that's not going to phase us. That's not going to push us out of a series. That's the difference. When those guys are that good and they want it that much, they'll mow you down. And you can complain about if you're a fan of the Jets, you can complain about Hellebuyck. You can say, where's the response? Why is there blowouts? Why isn't it close? When those guys that are that good decide they're going to do that, there's nothing you can do. I'm sorry. There's nothing you can do. That's what
it is. You're right. MJ used that word the other day, murder people at home. And, that's what they did the last two games. Flat out crushed Winnipeg. Now, Adam
Winnipeg's
Lowry
got to own some of that. I mean,
I get it.
100%. They've got to own. You've got to have pushback. You've got to be able to control things. You've got to be able to slow it down. You've got to be able to be physical. That Makar goal, Adam Lowry, who's usually a physical guy, he does a drive-by on that instead of trying to run him. To me,
but I'm pretty sure if you talk to those guys, in a candid conversation, even some of them would say, I didn't know what that was all about.
We don't have an answer.
You know what I mean? Sometimes you just look at a guy and you're like, damn, man.
I'm with you. Listen, Makar's the best defenseman in the world. Hughes has had a better year. Hughes has been great. No one's taken anyone over Cale Makar. He's the best defenseman in the world. And there's, I think, possibly a bigger gap between 1 and 2 than there is McDavid at 1 versus 2 in terms of forwards. That's how good that kid is. He's unbelievable, and he's won. And he won a Conn Smythe. Remember him in the playoffs? Remember him in the Cup final? The numbers he was putting up? Guy's a machine. But the guy on Winnipeg that can put his hand up and say, I'm as good at my position as you guys are at yours is Hellebuyck. And that's the issue. He is really, really struggling. I mean, to the point where he's getting pulled for Larry Brossoit. And obviously, you got to go back to Hellebuyck, clearly. But how could you have any faith, Noodles? Last year against Vegas, it was really ugly for him statistically. Really ugly. This year, it's even worse. Yeah. He's got the worst numbers in the playoffs.
Well, you know what it is, too. Honestly, Vegas ran him out of the building last year, won the Stanley Cup. Colorado could win the Stanley Cup.
They could be doing the same thing.
They could be. Unfortunately, you might be, that's a bad matchup to start off with. But last year it was Vegas that just ran through everybody, and they started with Winnipeg. It might be the same situation here because Colorado is they are. But you're right.
But he's not making enough saves.
He's not making enough saves. But Winnipeg looks outclassed for me. I don't think it's just, hey, Hellebuyck's not making enough saves. They're not up. They're being outplayed. They're being outplayed, and it's unfortunate because Winnipeg was arguably one of the hottest teams. Won the last 8. Yep. They got home ice, which what should have helped in this series based on how Colorado, their home record, how strong they were, what we talked about, what they were doing at home. It should be more balanced. It just hasn't been. It just flat out hasn't been.
It's not even close, and I don't think there's much hope out there either. Something to chew on, brought to you by Boston Pizza, Canada's favorite sports bar. From tip-offs to tie bites and puck drops to pizza, BP's elite lineup of apps, wings, and ice cold beers, always dialed in for game time. Hustle in your local BP tonight. We've been asking online, not surprisingly, based on where we do the show, who should be taking more heat right now, down 3-1? Is it the Leafs or the Jets? 86% of the votes saying the Leafs. I'm not surprised with our audience. And it might be the case based on their history, but Winnipeg's got a similar history in the playoffs. Like last year got ugly. Rick Bonus's comments post-series last year were pretty wild. Mm-hmm. And, they got rid of Pierre-Luc Dubois. They bought out Blake Wheeler. They had a great season. They had just as good of a season, if not better than the Leafs. Yes, tough matchup, but 2 versus 3. They're at home. The Leafs are on the road. I think I would lean Leafs because I don't think Boston is as good as Colorado. But I think Winnipeg has been just as poor.
I'm going Fergie. I'm going Fergie. Can't confirm or deny. I'm giving them both 50-50.
Yeah.
It's like the Leafs kind of looks worse, but how can you even saying that? Winnipeg doesn't exactly look so hot that series either, getting dummied like that three times in a row.
I would say,
man.
I think Winnipeg's looks worse on paper because of the goals they've given up. Like they're losing 5-1,
right?
That type of stuff. Where at least the Leafs, it's 3-1 and it's 4-2 empty netter. But and you could argue Colorado's a better team than Boston, but not by much. Based on statistical what they did this season. But I look at it, they're both kind of, I'm in the Fergie situation too. You're down 3-1. Your best players haven't played to their best, to their capability on both sides, and you're chasing it against 2 very good teams that don't seem to be wanting to let up.
I'd probably say Winnipeg also because Nylander missed the first 3 games, and now Matthews, whatever's going on with him, he's not himself. And I understand everyone's dealing with something, but those are pretty significant. And I am curious where this goes with the Leafs. If they go out kind of with the whimper tomorrow night, how quickly from within the organization details come out on what's up with Matthews, what was going on with Willie, Marner's high ankle sprain. I don't think anyone wants to hear it. It's certainly not going to soften any blows.
Dude, it'll be a gong show.
It will be a gong show, but the Leafs are going to do their best to try to mute that, and try to get out in front of it and, leak out this is what's been going on and this is how difficult it was and blah, blah, blah. I'm not saying anyone should accept it or believe it. And here's the problem that the Leafs have is they have used every single bullet in the gun in terms of excuses, explanations, up against the wall. What do you want out of us? Tough matchup. They've been doing it for 8 years. So it's going to fall on deaf ears. But that is something that I think will come up as this series unfolds or if it comes to a conclusion pretty quickly, where I don't think Winnipeg is in the same spot. Mike Johnson in 20 minutes. Richard Griffin on Jays Kansas City. He's coming up in the 6 p.m. hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Mike Johnson will join us in about 10 minutes. Look back on Game 4, Leafs-Bruins. Look ahead to Game 5 tomorrow night. Couple of games in the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. The Rangers sweeping the Capitals. And Alex Ovechkin without a point. Really didn't do much, didn't do anything. But they were so overmatched. Like, it didn't, even if Ovi played great, they were getting crushed. Like, New York is going to destroy them. And Carolina's going to do that to the Islanders. Credit to New York. They didn't get swept. Win in overtime. That's a cool story. Good for them.
You know what that gets you, though.
But it's not getting anywhere. Yeah.
No.
And, a lot of people are starting to connect some dots here to, like, upcoming coaching changes because Dave Haxtell was let go today in Seattle.
That's 17 in the last calendar year. That's
so
crazy.
many coaches. Like, it's just
that's watered down league. Players aren't good enough. Teams are just scrambling to get a bump. Yeah, it's a joke. It's really a joke.
Yeah, and yet, Ron Francis, Rod Brindamore, they go back. Rod Brindamore needs a contract down in Carolina. Craig Berube's out there. There's other coaches.
Think about what you just said. Like, just if the owner just says it out loud to himself, teams are running through coaches, okay? Mm-hmm. You could talk about however many in the last year, and they have the best one in the game. The best one in the game, and they don't want to pay him. Do you know how outrageous that is?
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir right now.
Like, Jesus.
And maybe it gets done. You know him well. He wants to stay in Carolina by all accounts. I mean, he's been there for a long time.
He's not doing a hometown discount this time. You got to pay the guy and pay his staff or he's leaving.
Well, if
he's
that's
not doing
the case, if it's top bidder gets him, then there will be a lot of teams that will be fighting for him.
There will be teams that will fire their coach for him.
Absolutely.
Well, but I think what you're trying to do is wait for this first round to be over, because there might be changes out, of teams that go out in the first round.
And no kidding, and Carolina might go on a long run, so teams will be sitting and waiting anyway. You better damn know.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where the collusion comes in. The agent gets a call, hey, if we wait this out, how are we looking? But what if they go on a long run, and then the owner in Carolina says, you got it, here's all your money, and he stays anyway. That's a dangerous game.
Right.
And that's the musical chairs that comes with coaching in the NHL. But 17 coaches in and out over the course of a year. It's wild. And I fully expect more to come, in the next week or two. I fully expect that to be the case. All right, Mike Johnson coming up. More on the weekend of the Stanley Cup playoffs. There's some crazy stuff going on in the NBA as well. The Suns, KD got swept. Crazy, man. KD's out.
Coach getting injured.
Yeah.
Where's that, Minnesota?
Yes, it never stops. It never, ever stops.
I don't know why I'm laughing, but I felt bad for him.
Injured.
Yeah,
it was crazy.
Tough look.
Yeah.
Hour 2 coming up. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4.